It's a great point, and it also brings up the question of Ukraine, which is in some ways what we're about to talk about. So as all of this news is unfolding here in Washington, D.C., and over in the Middle East, in Beijing, there is the third annual Belt and Road Summit taking place. This is on the 10th anniversary to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the Belt and Road Initiative, which I think has been argued persuasively so, that it is sort of neo-colonialist exercise, but we could get into that maybe, Krystal. The point is, we could put the first element up on the screen, that Putin and Xi Jinping are meeting today. They met briefly yesterday. We're going to put some video of that up on the screen. You'll see it rolling as we're talking here. They did a handshake, public handshake for the cameras yesterday. You can see this rolling on the screen. They are then going to have a meeting today. Xi Jinping is delivering the keynote address today. He met with Viktor Orban yesterday, some other world leaders. This is actually Putin's second visit outside of Russia since he was indicted by the International Criminal Court in March. So his travel is actually limited right now because of the war in Ukraine and alleged Russian war crimes. He is being treated by Kremlin news sources right now as like the guest of honor at Xi Jinping's summit. They're showing it as the Washington Post described, kind of his clout on full display in the summit, that he is being treated as one of the great world leaders by Xi Jinping and being honored by Xi Jinping. They, of course, had they established what they call the no limits friendship. I think that was last year that they kind of formalized that question of a no limits friendship. They've been referring to each other as old friends over the course of this summit. And Krystal, we talked earlier in the show about, it keeps coming to my mind as just the phrase like 1913 vibes. There's a lot of people talking about 1930 vibes. Both of them have really criticized Israel, in addition to their ally, Iran. So you have Putin, you have Xi Jinping meeting as Joe Biden is in Israel. I mean, that split screen in and of itself is just absolutely remarkable. You have Biden meeting in Tel Aviv with Netanyahu. You have in Beijing, Putin and Xi Jinping meeting with some other world leaders. And both of those sides are becoming more and more stark. That question of who is with sort of Iran and Hezbollah, as this could potentially turn quickly into a military conflict based on the U.S. saying they would seriously, likely consider boots on the ground military involvement. Well, they say not combat, but military involvement if Hezbollah were to launch a strike. And all of this, I mean, talk about fraught. You used that word earlier in the show, Krystal. I think it is absolutely perfect. It is such a fragile geopolitical ecosystem right now. So the split screen of them talking and projecting, Xi Jinping and Putin both projecting this idea sort of a new generation of world leadership. That's America's time is at an end, is the line, and it is time for these new countries. And China really sees their form of it's this sort of authoritarian, mercantile. I mean, it's just such a strange blend of different governing philosophies, but they see it as socialism with Chinese characteristics, and they think it should kind of lead the world going forward. Now, all of their talks of peace and unity and a bright global future ring hollow, given their own personal records of human rights abuses. That isn't to say anybody else is perfect. It is to say that them having this conversation when Vladimir Putin is implicated, and Xi Jinping, by the way, is implicated in all kinds of just grave human rights abuses and war crimes. I don't think they're really projecting the global leadership. They think they are, Krystal, but it is terrifying. The split screen is actually really terrifying because it shows how quickly everything can spill over into a literal world war. And that's not, I actually don't think that's hyperbolic right now when you have the involvement of Iran and Hezbollah on the line with allies that are meeting to project their intertwinement and their allyship right now.
American influence in the world is in tatters. And I really think it does begin with the Iraq War and the war on terror and, what we did in response to 9/11, which, makes this moment even more horrific that it seems like none of those lessons from 9/11 and our response seem to have been learned.
Which was the goal of Al-Qaeda. It was to undercut American leadership on the global stage.
Works like a charm. Works like a friggin' charm. And, and that's all our own idiot murderous leaders. But between the Ukraine war and now the Hamas attacks and Israel's assault on Gaza, you have an acceleration of the realization of a multipolar world. I mean, that's what's really come into focus. And it's really important to keep in mind, obviously, we're Americans and we're consuming American media and, getting fed like a very Western view of both the Ukraine war and of what's happening in Israel right now. And, the American people overwhelmingly on the side of Israel. In fact, the American people seem to be more on the side of Netanyahu than the Israeli people even are at this point. So we have this particular perspective, and it can be easy to feel like that must be shared widely in the world. But it's actually not. The bulk of the world sees both of these conflicts very differently, very differently. And so that creates a very clear set of dividing lines that, yes, as China and Russia foment this partnership, and you see countries like India trying to figure out where they want to fit in this, and Africa and South America. I mean, there's just a very different view of the world that is held by the populations in these places, let alone in overwhelmingly in the Middle East. So that's where we are right now, and in some ways, as I said, both with the Ukraine war and now what's happening in Israel, I think America has adopted a posture of learned impotence, of unwillingness to use the incredible leverage of American dollars that we could use in this situation if we actually cared about affecting a particular outcome. We could use that leverage, but there seems to be this posture of learned impotence on both sides. And, the one thing I will say on the other side of this is China's got a lot of problems right now with their own economic situation. Very hard to know exactly what the numbers are, what it looks like. And there have been many, dire warnings about what's going to happen in China with their economic situation before that have never come to pass. But you have a huge real estate bubble, you've got demographic issues, that you've got, an economic downturn. Even the thought was after COVID and after zero COVID lockdown there that they'd have this explosion of growth. It's been quite the opposite. So they do have their own issues as well. I don't want to pretend like they're this unstoppable giant that's continuing to move forward, et cetera. But I do think you see very clearly a different world and different power dynamics coming into play right now.
Yeah, that's a really important point, especially because as Chinese exports to the United States are declining, and the Washington Post points this out too, they're finding an export market in Russia. And so that sort of economic partnership and that trade relationship is becoming really important. Also, Putin has looked to China, Iran, and North Korea for, as the Post puts it, drones, artillery shells, rockets, and other weapons in his ongoing war against Ukraine. So their partnership, they found sort of different benefits in it so far. They already, but that is to say, though, they still have serious problems of their own at home. Putin, most recently, has, again, the Post points this out, failed to broker peace in that horrific situation in Armenia and Azerbaijan. So it's not, it's certainly not all rosy for them either. Not that it really ever would be, but that side by side is genuinely. You used this word earlier, let's bring it full circle, chilling, as we see things unfolding in the Middle East. And I do think it's important to recognize that groups like Hezbollah and Hamas have this sort of philosophy of global terror. Their idea is not just about Middle East. The Middle East, obviously, they do have near-term priorities in places like Palestine, for example. But we've seen that global reach enacted more than a dozen times, in the last 20 years. So it's a frightening reality when you combine that with nuclear powers like Russia and China, to be sure.
Hamas has always focused on national self-determination, so it's different from like ISIS or Al-Qaeda in terms of their aims and their end goals. But when you go back and you listen to what we played earlier of Netanyahu talking up a civilizational conflict between what he describes as barbarians and the civilized world, when you see some of the language that's coming out of Iran, when you see some of the language coming from Hezbollah, when you see, these meetings, high-level meetings between Russia and China, and you've got an American president in Israel as they are, inflicting horror on Gaza civilians, Palestinian civilians. The world is genuinely at a precipice and, may come through it without a broader conflict, but that is far from certain as we sit and as we watch this right now. The fact that meeting in Jordan, where there was supposed to be some diplomacy between the U.S., acting as best we can as some neutral arbiter, even though we were far from anything approaching that with Arab leaders, that was canceled. And you now have very hot and angry protests throughout the region. These are really troubling signs for what the future may hold. So, we're continue to try to understand it as best we can and parse through the varying reports in a very difficult landscape, fog of war, and all of that. And, Emily, I'm grateful to be able to be with you today. And to all of you guys out there, thank you for trusting us to try to sort through very challenging and complex situations as they're unfolding.
Huge shout out to producers Mac and Griffin for all of their work on that too.
Oh,
They've
yeah.
been sifting through so much footage, trying to verify those things because we take seriously the responsibility of bringing you guys the best and the most accurate information that we possibly can. On that note, if you haven't subscribed, please do. You can watch the full show of Counterpoints early and you get it without any commercial interruptions, the full video. If you're not a podcast listener, you get all of it if you're a subscriber. So make sure to do that. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Hit the notification button on YouTube. Krystal, you guys have just been doing incredible work throughout this whole conflict. Your coverage has just been excellent, and you're so busy. So thank you so much for taking the time to join the show today.
It was an honor to get to do it today, especially on such a consequential news day. And Sagar and I will be back in studio tomorrow with full coverage for you. And also, we'll be watching what happens today if there's any breaking news that we need to do a quick video on. So I will see you guys tomorrow. And actually, Emily, we're going to have you in studio with us tomorrow, I believe, too. So we're going to have the whole gang together for you guys. All right, we'll see you then.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.